it really, there we go. We really begin and end with the student. We need to understand who they are and what they care about. After the 15 years I've been in this field, I can tell you that these are indeed the steps for success. It's actually that simple and also that complicated. So please note that I've emphasized the word students here because college planning and preparation, it's a process that requires independence and accountability. We need to help our students because they need to develop that intrinsic motivation and independence in order to be eventually successful in college. And I'm going to make that smaller. There we go. Okay, so but before we get started, a lesson in anatomy and physiology, just kidding. Not going into anything too heavy here. You all know this already. The frontal lobes of the brain control executive functioning. They are not fully developed until people are actually probably in their mid-20s or later, but it translates to less efficient planning and follow through. And it directly impacts everything, not just high school performance, not just college readiness, but life. And so we're going to need patience, we're going to need flexibility, extra planning and support, and almost always extra time. So we like to flip the script with our students. Everyone starts with, what about the colleges? What do they want? What are they looking for? Where are you applying? All of this pressure. We don't want that for our students. We really need to ratchet that anxiety down. And again, we're going to start with the student because if we flip the script, we can show students that it is about them. It is about what they like to do, what they're interested in. And we want to really encourage thoughtfulness about how they learn and what they love and what they're headed. So we ask a million questions. Honestly, we have 6 pages of questions that we ask over a series of interviews that find out, what do you want to get from college? Little things like, do you do better on tests or assignments? We ask, who edits your papers? We used to ask, does someone edit your paper? And we usually got a no. So it's a trick question. When we ask who edits, we usually hear parents. So it gives us things to talk about and explore with the student, help them understand themselves. We ask, if you had a free evening, what would you do? Would you go hang out at Makerspace, a lab on campus? Would you go out with friends? Would you go to a sporting event, etc.? This is really powerful. It helps students start to explore who they are, what they love to do, and start to think of this as a self-centered process of figuring themselves out before they start to know about colleges. And then we get to the all-important what colleges are looking for, but only after really getting them excited and thinking about themselves more broadly. I'm going to share with you the 12 top things the colleges are looking for. It's compiled biannually by the professional organization that we all belong to, IECA, and here are the top 12. And please don't read it with anxiety, because I think that there are some great things for students, and especially our students with ADHD, to maximize here and use to their advantage. So I'm just going to talk about a few of these. I'm generalizing, as you know, and we know every student is different and comes to this in a different way. So the first 2 are the ones that you all are expecting. We certainly have students with ADHD who earn straight A's. We have students with ADHD who earn A's in the areas they're interested in, and that's an important point. And then we have students with ADHD whose grades are not as predictable, nor possibly as indicative of their cognitive abilities as we would like. Everyone is different. And my main point here is, of course, we want students to do well. We also want to understand what's getting in their way, because it's not going to go away organically. But we also know that colleges see students as people and not just numbers. so that we feel pretty confident that if we can help students figure out what's going on, get some coaching, work with their teachers, come up with a better schedule, improve sleep hygiene, make different changes, that if we can get them to get a positive upward trend going and they explain what's gone on, that can be a really great thing in a college application. Parents also and students often ask about the rigor of the curriculum. How many APs do I need to get into a good college? And of course, good college is such a weighted phrase. We'll talk more about that later. But the answer is as many as you can do, getting good grades and living a productive and happy life. We don't think it is worth students suffering. And you all know that we're in a time of mental health crisis for many teens in order to add one more AP. So the answer goes back to that idea of what are students interested in, because we know from research that true interest increases focus. So take the APs in the areas of interest and take it down a notch in the others if that's what works for your student. Solid scores on standardized tests. I'm sure you're following the news. Over the pandemic, up to 2/3 of colleges went test optional or test blind. I know that a lot of this is here to stay. What I love about it is it gives students choice. I have students who nail the SAT and the ACT and cannot turn in assignments to save themselves. So I've had students with barely a 3.0, but national merit semifinalists. Again, we'll explain that to colleges and hope that they'll understand what is going on with a student and how capable the student is as he works to improve himself. We have other students who standardized tests are never going to work very well. And for those students, we will look at other ways to show their prowess and their capability and their interests. But I will encourage the student to look at the requirements at schools of interest to make sure that even mediocre scores wouldn't be a great idea, so that they aren't immediately disqualified from applying to that school. I want to move down a few to demonstrated leadership and initiative. I love this one, and I want to highlight the word initiative here, because this is a tremendous opportunity for our students who can be creative and thinking outside the box. I think a little silver lining, if we can say that about the pandemic, is that students were encouraged to try things on their own. So we had kids baking bread, we had kids starting small home-based businesses, we had students researching questions of real interest, teaching themselves to code, all sorts of fun things. Admissions officers love this type of thing, and that's another thing that I think is here to stay. So if your student has other interests outside of school, develop them, record them, have fun with it. I actually think doing something on your own for a student can be more impressive than being the fifth co-captain for the cross-country team. It can really show what the student is capable of and how much they would bring to campus. Similarly, a little further down, special talents or experiences. Again, let's use the creativity that our students bring to the table. A lot of them do some interesting volunteering work, even out of school experiences like jobs, clubs, all of that can be really important. If the student travels, make a photo journal. If the student is in a band, take video to share. So again, these top 12 things are all important, and no one student can do them all. So don't look at it that way, but look at it as, my student can really add to the mix with these things. And maybe we can explain some other things that would make sense. The third thing, step 3, so we've got sort of know yourself, and then we have what our college is looking for. This is a tricky one. I know Janet Price, who I've known for a long time, she's wonderful, talked about this last month in Transitions, about transitioning. And if you haven't seen her talk, I really recommend it. But I can't not talk about this because it's so critical. As students move from 4th grade to 5th grade or 9th grade to 10th, they understand that the fundamental challenges will remain the same. The work might get a little bit harder, but they really sort of get how this works. College is not 13th grade, so that part isn't true, but no one tells this to students. So I feel that we have to give them a clue about what's coming to get them motivated, to get their skills ready, to really become college-ready adults. We have a long list. I'm happy to share the entire handout with anyone who's interested. Just email me at the end of the presentation or in a few days or what have you. I'm just going to point out that first one because this is the critical part. These are the differences between high school and college. Students need to anticipate. They need to imagine that instead of being in school 8 hours a day, seeing the same teacher day after day, being on a regular schedule, then maybe an extracurricular, home for dinner, then homework. Instead of that, flip those 30 hours on their head. They usually 30 hours in class, maybe 12 to 15 hours of homework, maybe. In college, it's the opposite. So 12 to 15 hours a week is in the classroom getting instruction, but students are expected to be able to do 2 to 3 hours a week per hour of class on their own in order to do the work necessary to keep up. So let's think about that for a minute. Students have so much less class time. They're expected to do so much studying and writing and organizing on their own. Think about your student and how your student would do with that amount of increased freedom and that amount of decreased structure. So that's something we want them to think about, and because we want to see them step up in planning, studying independently, completing multi-part projects and papers, which, for example, college applications are very much that. And we want students, can they anticipate what's going to be on the test? So there's lots of little skills that build up to really understanding and being ready for the differences between high school and college. The fourth step is to find strategies that work for the student. Again, we have a lot of different individuals here, and practice skills for college readiness. And by practice, I mean practice, practice, practice. And these are the essential skills that we believe, and I'm going to go through them one by one. So let's start. I'm going to go pretty quickly. Janet did cover parts of this, but again, this is foundational information, so I want you all to really understand it. The first is this idea of student awareness, self-awareness, who I am, what my strengths are, where I need help. I've had parents come in and they want to work with me and they say, but you can't use the word learning difference or ADHD. It's sort of like, this isn't going to work. The student has to own who they are and begin to accept it. Again, not perfection. We're talking about teenagers, but to develop that awareness of who I am and how I work and begin to accept I can be successful if I just have a little extra time, if I talk to a coach, if I work with a teacher, if I have notes, whatever it is. Moving to self-advocacy and later self-determination. By the time students hit college, they need to figure out what they want to do with their lives. They have to make those decisions. So we want them working on these first 3 steps early. And again, in that idea of practicality, we like for our students to attend their IEP or accommodations meeting and start to be there with the purpose of, this is about me. I know what I need to be successful. Here's what I need, or here's what's working and here's what's not working. Because they will have to do this in college for themselves, not too far from now. The second essential skill is academics. It's obvious, except I'm going to move beyond the obvious quickly to the idea of these 3 things: writing, ubiquitous, and extremely difficult for students with ADHD because writing is organization more than anything else. The grammar is actually easier, I think, than getting the ideas down in an organized way, especially along paper. But luckily, we're in an area, we have so many good writing tutors and coaches and helpers to help students get the fundamentals down that they might have missed because they weren't available to really learn it earlier. Study skills and note-taking is rarely explicitly taught. in school, and sometimes not even honestly needed until college, and students don't have it. They just don't learn it. So coaching on this or a summer program can give students the skills they need. Again, a lot of the test prep and local firms do a fabulous job with these skills. Here's something near and dear to all of our hearts. Executive functioning is an essential skill for college, or at least it needs to be at the point where it can be supported for students to succeed. This is Thomas Brown's model. I've always liked this one, but there are many good ones. When I see the components laid out this way, activation and focus, I really get that understanding that the way I used to encourage my own students, my own kids to focus wasn't so helpful. Luckily, there are, again, high school students can get coaching, and there are also firms that will take students from high school to college with transitional coaching at college, virtually and elsewhere. If you haven't seen ADHD Explained, I suggest you Google it. It's a 30-minute presentation. Again, it really reminds us, even if we've learned this before, how important this concept is. So I love the Zits cartoons. They're funny, and Jeremy is sort of my poster child. The idea that mom's giving him his social security card, she wants him to memorize it, and he's showing it to her to memorize it for him. Oh, I meant for you to memorize it. Oh, that's another way to go, I guess. That's Jeremy's approach, but we as parents are partly culpable for this. What we say in our practice is don't just do something, stand there, which is very, very hard for parents to do. But we want parents to understand that as they decrease their involvement in the day-to-day of their students' life, they allow their students to increase their skills and capability to manage themselves. So don't just do something, stand there whenever possible. And really look for ways actually to get students to take over small tasks one at a time. Medication management, figure out a way to use that little organizer or something, but get students starting in high school to manage their medication, to know how to check the balance of their debit card on, or what have you, on their phone, to meet with teachers if a test didn't go as they had expected, make their own appointments for haircuts and things. Little things go a long way, and it's our job to stop doing it, even though it's harder and takes longer, and get them to start. The more they can do them for themselves, the easier college will be when they step onto campus. The next essential skill is social and emotional competence. And for that, we all focus on the academics, but these are the other two really important components. We always mention to students and see horror that in the dorm, the person in charge is a year or two older than your child. We ask, have you had a roommate? Has a student had to share a room, negotiate rules, and so forth? Can the student manage screen time? Can the student put themselves on a good sleep schedule, or will they drift into those vampire hours that really get students into trouble, staying up way too late and taking naps? Social connections, communication skills. We like students here to spend time away from home, both for the idea of living away and developing social skills. We love summer camps or programs on college campuses. The first time that a student is away from home for an extended period should not be when they are dropped off for their dorm at college. You can pick a specialty camp that works on these types of skills, or sometimes just a pre-college program can work. Depends on the students. If there are social communication skills issues, there are wonderful peers groups. We're just fortunate to be in the DC metro area with so many resources and options. Finally, continuity of care. What has been in place and has allowed this student to be successful is a critical thing to look at, because you want to keep that going. The transition to college can be stressful, and so you don't want to be cutting off any kind of care just as the student is taking on these new challenges. Services and campuses are ramping up. I just heard today, Some college now has 9 mental health professionals. It was like triple the number, and we all were applauding. But that's not uniformly so, and services are limited. So you want good continuity of care is something to think about ahead of time. The next important skill set is growth, motivation, resilience. Carol Dweck and her concepts were so important about self-motivation. We want parents to allow their students to have the small tumbles at home, where they're comfortable, where there's support, where they can get help. We want them to learn to pause. We want them to problem solve, ask for help when needed. Providing that practice at rebounding from small mistakes creates a resilient, self-motivated student. Don't believe me, read The Self-Driven Child by Bill Stickstrud and Ned Johnson. It's excellent and important lessons that we need before sending our kids off. So this is the quick summary. And again, not looking for perfection here, but students are college ready when they get themselves. And if you think about the essential skills, this is the things that I started with, this knowing themselves and this self-acceptance. They need to be able to do their work. They need to be able to manage their life outside the classroom. And then they need the ability to work with others, peers, roommates, as well as adults, faculty members, staff members, and they have to be able to recover from mistakes. So that's a lot to think about. What if the student isn't ready? And many students are not. When I did my little physiology slide, you heard, and I know you've heard before, that students with ADHD can develop more slowly in executive functioning in this prefrontal cortex than other students, and sometimes extra time is really a gift that we can give. If students are not ready, it can be just yet. They are not ready yet. We know that students with proper preparation and support, that they can and will exceed. In fact, we know that most learning centers and colleges report really high success rates for students who use the services. Students use services, I've heard again and again, in the high 80s and 90s, not 41% or not 52%, but in the 80s and 90s, that percentage of students is being successful and graduating college. But I should describe that there are also alternative pathways to success besides traditional college. And some students just may need some extra time. Some students may need just a slower on-ramp, but there are alternatives available. If college is the plan, we recommend that students absolutely apply to colleges with their peers, get accepted, and then early in the process, ask for a deferral in writing. Not all colleges will grant a deferral, but many to most will. And it just will make things a lot easier to get that in place. The time to ask for a deferral is February or March, not July, because colleges are concerned with enrollment and filling beds, and they will be a lot less acquiescent for such a late request that can sometimes happen from students. So let me just touch on a few of these, and a few I won't spend too much time on. But the first thing is summer transition programs. If students are pretty much ready but need some more help, there are summer transition programs by some of the specialty schools. So Landmark College or Beacon College have programs. Focus Collegiate has something called a Summer Start, where students live in the Back Bay of Boston, learn independent skills, and get sort of that jump start to being college ready. There's a CREATE program at Mercyhurst University for students on the autism spectrum. At the end of that, you get sort of an evaluation of skills that the students might be lacking, or if the student's ready to go. And so this can be really helpful. We also find that summer transition programs, when offered by the college the student is looking to go to, absolutely go to those whenever possible, because it gives students time to see the campus, meet other students, meet faculty. Sometimes they're invited for a week or two or longer early in the summer, go home. When they come back, they feel like they're sophomores because they know people and they know how things go. Other times it might be checking in a day or 2 or 3 early. Again, these can be really, really helpful. Gap years do not have to be something that is done to or for the student, just sent away for one program. It can be that, but we love it when these programs are individualized and the student is engaged in the planning. So a gap year doesn't have to be one thing. It can be a combination of volunteering somewhere. It can be working. There can be an internship. Students can travel. Students can try a course or two at the local community college with a coach to get going on some college skills or even work. Caveat there is that if students do anything for credit, they should check with their college to make sure they're not endangering their status as an entering freshman. Sounds silly, but it's not trivial. It generally, if it's just a course or two, it will work out, but please check with the registrar at the college. Students who take gap years, research has shown that they are happier with the experience. They graduate on time at higher levels. They report more maturity. They're more able to make decisions about their major. We as parents are always, I think, concerned, will the student go back to college if he or she takes a year off? They seem a little burned out now. Will they go back? And the answer is that in the high 90s, somewhere around 97, 98% of students plan to go to college, take a gap year, do go back, and they do better. PG year is the next. I'll mention this one because it's a little bit unusual. PG stands for postgraduate year. And this actually is that 13th grade that college is not. It's offered by boarding schools, a lot of them in the Northeast. Originally, they were for athletes to gain more size and skills. And now a lot of them are for students with different academic needs or social skills needs. So this is an extra year, somewhere between high school and college. Develops more skills, definitely more independence. They're living away. So it's a nice transition for some students. Specialized colleges, there are only 2 colleges in the US for students with learning disabilities or ADHD, and that's Beacon College in Florida and Landmark College in Vermont. They're both good. They have different offerings, but they do a great job with students with learning differences. You can go there for a while. You can transfer out to a different school. You can stay and get an AA or even a BA. Occasionally, students who crash and burn in a more traditional college will go as a visiting scholar to Landmark, get the skills they need, and be able to return back to their other institution. I also want to mention college with a residential component. Some students who are academically in pretty good shape but need a lot of coaching and a little more supervision, may need social skills development, independent skills. There are several types of programs where students can live near a college, but not in the dorm, and get really these wraparound services. So College of Living Experience, CLE, has 5 or 6 locations, one in Rockville. CIP, College Internship Program, has at least as many. I think the closest one might be the one in the Berkshires in Lee or the one in Florida. And then Mansfield Hall has 3 locations. The nearest one here is in Burlington and supports multiple schools in Burlington, Vermont. And these can be, again, a good starting place for students. Students don't necessarily go there for 4 years, but maybe for the first year and then make that transition into the dorms or an apartment. Okay, and we've made it to step 5. So the models of support and services on campus. Students really need to understand these models. And I wanted to give you sort of a general understanding of how most work, because there's no real template, but at most colleges and universities, there are 2 buckets
two areas of general academic support for students. And it's really important to understand this because it gets very confusing. Everything is named different things. Sometimes all the offices are together, sometimes they're separated. But in general, the first type of support is learning support for all students. All students on campus can use tutoring, can use the writing center, can use advising, group study programs, this type of thing. There might be language labs, there might be some workshops. On some campuses, there are specific programs to help with retention, but these are all services open to everyone, and our students need to use them too. Sometimes they think, oh, I'm just supposed to use these other ones. No, this is where their classmates will go. This is where they will go for their tutoring, writing center, all of those sorts of things. So this is for any student on campus. The second big bucket is for students who are registered with the Office of Accessibility or Disability Services. And these services are restricted to students who are registered. Some of these offices only arrange for accommodations. So your student will be sending in documentation that says what they need and explains what their testing shows. The students will then have a conversation with this office and they will agree on the accommodations, get a letter to show professors, or maybe it's put into a system where it's emailed to the professors, but it will say what their accommodations are. And for many offices of disability or accessibility services, this is the main function, is reviewing the testing and assigning the accommodations and dealing with grievances. But there are other offices that offer supplemental support beyond that and have learning specialists in place to help students. They sometimes offer one-to-one weekly check-ins with students, which is just a fabulous service to have, at least again for that first semester till students have things under their belts a little bit. There's been more and more ADHD or executive function coaching offered. Professionals on campuses are going through training. So a lot of them really are just wonderful and honestly know how to coach students through the academic process there. Sometimes they offer study skills courses or one-on-one study skills help, workshops. There can be social coaching sometimes, social events for students. They generally have access to or have a distraction-reduced testing center, and then also assistive technology that students might need for their classwork or for exams. The third little piece of this is, and it's really part of the second bucket, is that some colleges then also offer a fee-based program on top of the general services in the Office of Disability and Accessibility Services. And I will talk more about these in a little bit, but these are fewer, but could be really important for your student, and determining what level of support they need is one of the steps that you will be taking. Again, we're going to go back to that very beginning. It's based on the student, their strengths, their abilities, and then we figure out, based on what that student can do and what more they can learn, what will that student need when they hit campus. And then I wanted to add the little ending is resources off campus. Another one of our little silver linings, and we have to grab them all from the pandemic, is that some of the virtual coaching programs have really taken off and are specific to college students. So we have had students work with several different firms. College Success Plan is one, Beyond Booksmart, Focus Collegiate. There are many really good ones. And these are coaches that will start usually the summer before. Some even work earlier with high school students. But during that summer between high school and college, they will help students prepare, get their portal set up, all the things that students might struggle to do by themselves, get them ready for and off to a running start on campus. And the beauty of this is if there's a great fit college that doesn't quite have the support needed, if everything else falls in place, this gives students more options. So we love it for that. Student support, though, just because it's there doesn't mean that it's going to work, because students have to be willing partners, as I was saying before. They have to be accountable and independent and self-aware and willing. Many of our students can't wait to get on campus away from us parents. I'm free. I don't want to be this kid with the ADHD anymore. We can all understand and empathize. But it really can lead to disaster, because the law changes, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and the student really needs to step up here. A lot of students will say, no, I'm fine. I want to try this on my own. And if I find that I'm struggling, then I'll sign up for services. And you can just imagine how disastrous that is, because it's a step-by-step progression of things falling by the wayside that gets them to that point. And everyone should understand that it can take weeks to get accommodations in place on campuses, and it's never retroactive, never. So students need to realize it's going to be harder to catch up than it was to get behind. And it's well worth signing up and using them. And what we tell students is, we want you to have more in place than you think you need. And as you show that you're successful and figure out what you don't need, fade it away. No one's going to make you try to use things that really don't work for you. Okay, so I wanted to come back to the law for just a minute. This is just a quick essential background on the law. You probably may already know, but your student may not know, that when he or they walk across the stage, shake hands with the principal, and receive their high school diploma, they are never again going to be covered by an education law. It's done. That's all we require students, is to go to high school, so there are no educational provisions in the law once they have graduated. Students are used to high school, where the faculty, the staff, has been directed towards success. They will only ever be covered again now by an anti-discrimination law. So no one is in charge of this except for them. No one is reaching out to your student to say, are you sure you don't need your extra time? Do you want this textbook in print or on a CD? No one's knocking on their dorm door to get them out of bed to come to the exam because they're late. It doesn't work that way. Students have to be responsible to be their own self-advocates and get what they need. But there is a range of learning support on campus. So we just talked about compliance with the law. And this is something, again, that's going to help you determine which colleges work for your students and which don't. And I'm just going to spend a minute on compliance, because while colleges have to comply with the law, again, they are not responsible for success any longer, just for access. So access is having a person on campus, the one I mentioned before, who is designated to review accommodations, set the accommodations, and handle grievances. That is really the definition of compliance with the law on a college campus. So I've talked a little bit about the support services for all students, and I've described accommodations and services, that second bucket for registered students. Fee-based programs are almost always out of that second bucket, the Office of Disability and Accessibility Services, but occasionally some are just out of the regular support for all students, and you'll just keep an eye out for that. But parents ask me, but what are the good colleges? What are good supportive colleges for my students? And I know I'm frustrating them because I don't give them just a list, because you all know by now, it depends on the student. But I want to make an important point here. There are nearly 4,000 colleges in the US. We all know the same 50 because they have great football or basketball teams, because they're Ivy Leagues, because they're close by and regional. And it's a trap to start with just that list. There are colleges that are great fits for all of our students. And I'm going to talk about fit in a minute, but I want everyone to just pause and remain flexible and think about that this wealth of colleges and what support means and what your student will need to be successful and productive and happy on campus. So let me give you 3 examples of what might be good support. And you think about if these are the types of programs that would, and colleges and universities that would work for your student. So let me start with an example of a small liberal arts college. There are about 2,000 students, which is pretty typical. It's a wonderfully accommodating and kind place where about 90% of the students are under 20, 90% of the classes are under 20 students. The students and the faculty are a little bit quirky, intellectually curious. Introverts can do well here. There's a learning commons, and remember that's the one for all students, learning commons for all students that offers one-on-one peer tutoring, study rooms for group tutoring, workshops in general for study strategies like time management and organization. They have peer counselors in the dorms, not just the RAs, and their job is to really reach out and mentor students. And they're trained by the directors of the Disability Services Office so that they can also work with students who learn a little bit differently. They have trained peer tutoring in the Writing Center as well. In the Student Disability Services, they have a small staff, but the assistant director will meet weekly with students for check-ins. They have started some groups on disability education. They're trying to start a book club. They have some structured study hall time for students who think they would benefit from them. They're starting a group for students with chronic illnesses. You're getting the feeling, right? Course substitutions there are possible. If a student can't handle foreign language, they can take culture courses to satisfy the requirement. For math, students who have a math disability, because we know that some students with ADHD also have specific learning disabilities. They offer other types of courses that can substitute for math, like philosophy, and 1 to 2 math options are often offered every semester. One of the examples I heard was something called puzzles and games. Okay, so example 1, does that sound like your student? If not, how about example 2? The next is a medium-sized university with about 14,000 students. They're all very spirited, school-spirited kind of students, and they enter into the college in 10 different undergraduate colleges and schools. In terms of the learning environment, some of these schools are able to give that feeling of a slightly smaller school, but it still is a school with almost 15,000 students on campus. When students apply into school, then they have to apply into really a particular major. And while there's flexibility, you can't always easily move from school to school. So pluses and minuses there. The majority of classes are under 50 students, but over 25, and at least 10% are lecture classes over 50. The Center for Learning and Student Success, so that's their name for it. These all have different names, but that's the service for all students. Offers, it's mostly peer-to-peer delivery of services. So they have individual and group tutoring, some peer coaching, which is wonderful. And then the Center for Disability Resources for the registered students offers a fee-based coaching program. For the first year, students meet with a professional coach, trained staff, once or twice a week for time management, organizational skills, self-advocacy, all of the things we expect. And they can also have some short check-ins in addition to that. Students can continue with this program beyond freshman year at pared down services and less expensive option. So that's option 2. Does that sound like the right school for your students? Let me give you one third option. The third example is a technically oriented university that features co-op learning. Co-ops are when students leave campus for a full semester, work at a job, They still could live on campus or they could live away. They generally get paid, not always, but they often get paid. And then they come back to campus to continue their education and apply what they've learned. So many students graduate from co-op schools, co-op universities with a job offer. And some colleges you can do 1, 2, or 3 co-ops. So through the Academic Success Center here, and this is a school of about 15,000 students, all freshmen and sophomores can access free academic coaching and workshops on study skills. Or they also offer, through the Disability Services Office, a fee-based program that, oh no, sorry, I'm saying this wrong. There's also for all students, a fee-based instructor-led coaching program. So let me make sure I said this properly. There's peer coaching for freshmen and sophomore. If you would like more skilled coaching, if your student needs a little more, no matter whether they're registered or not, parents can pay for students to meet with an instructor for coaching. Tutoring, though, is decentralized. There's not a tutoring center. Each department has its own tutoring, so students need to be able to access that and need to know where to go and when to go. They offer some groups study. We like that a lot. And then train staff in disability services. Now we're moving to the second bucket. Also offers fee-based programs. One is a fee-based program for students on the autism spectrum that includes individual one-on-one meetings, social skills, social events twice a week. So lots of choices. So the idea here is to understand, I think these are all 3 wonderful programs for the right student. And there really are many, many varieties and variations available. You can see why I keep going back to it is about where your student is and how improved, what are their skills going to be like when they graduate high school? And then what is the good fit? What is the right fit for learning support on campus or occasionally supported from off campus? But that's not all there is to looking for a college. It is not just about the learning support. There's also the learning environment, and this is an important and unique, each college has a unique learning environment. So how does that student learn? Remember all those questions? We have many students who learn by doing. They really like to be active. They like to learn by doing things. So remember that co-op college that I mentioned before, where students who are happy moving and doing things and learning that way, rather than listening and reading, a co-op program or a very experiential learning program is going to work best for them, where they can really get out and work in their field for a semester or 2. So co-op programs like Rochester Institute of Technology, Drexel University, Northeastern, lots of co-ops, and others that just are more experiential. Elon, Wagner, there's lots. The next component of a learning environment is it collaborative versus competitive? Some students like a competitive environment and others are really ready to be more collaborative and work with others. So Worcester Polytechnic Institute, for example, has 7-week terms, and they're pretty much all collaborative projects and problem solving. When I was visiting there, they were talking about, one of them was how to get more water into Sudan. And they had engineers working with computer people, working with biologists, and it was really quite impressive. So students who like that sort of collaborative project-based learning, or just a more collaborative atmosphere. Some students, even if they don't like to participate, do well with discussion-based classes because they stay engaged. Different people are talking, things move, people might ask questions that they haven't quite formulated in their heads. In lectures, we find that students with ADHD, if they space out for just a minute or 2, they can then be lost 2/3 the way through the lecture and not really follow the rest. So how is your student with those situations? When you visit campuses, if you can have your students sit in on a lecture, a colleague of mine did that with her son. He promptly fell asleep. and learned very quickly that a large lecture hall was not going to be the best placement for him. I want to mention CTCL, Colleges That Change Lives. This is nothing to do with students with ADHD specifically, but the hallmark is that these are colleges with programs and faculty who care deeply about student development, who are willing to work to develop their students, to give them opportunities where they really care. The book is quite outdated now, so I recommend that if you're interested in this, you take a look at the website. It's a little bit more helpful. And then finally, this is not a throwaway. This is a really important point. Many students, and I've said this, I'm going to repeat it, with ADHD can really engage when they're interested and can really, it's painful for them to do things that they don't like. I know some of you are familiar with this concept. So take a look, not just at what majors are offered and all the cool courses, but students should really look and print out not just the curriculum for the programs they're looking at, but the general education requirements, sometimes called a core curriculum, because it can be 48 credits worth of torture, or like some colleges, there can be very few requirements. Students can really focus on what they're interested in. So colleges can have almost no requirements, like Rochester Institute of Technology, I think requires 2 or 3 courses specifically, and everything else is student directed. Brown, Grinnell, Hampshire, Smith all have really flexible curricula. And even in colleges that don't have sort of student choice, they can have a very flexible core where it just says, take something where you learn about the world. So instead of you must have 2 years of foreign language, you can sort of design what appeals to you. So we find that to be really, really important for our students. And lastly, I'm going to come back to the fit, because this is college is more than the students' learning differences. We all know that, right? It should be fun. The search should be fun and exciting. Yes, the learning support and learning environment must be part of the criteria, important components, priorities for the search, but they're not all the search. Students also get to talk about and think about sports on campus, where they want to be, in terms of location, Greek life, maybe clubs, activities, and all the fun things that everyone gets to look for. A couple of the elements of fit. There we go. A couple of the elements. The first is we like to talk about location and setting. For some students who might need some parental help from time to time, again, we hope not. Just going across the country may not be the right idea initially. Being a little closer to home, or maybe being in a part of the country where there's a relative that they have a good relationship with, could be helpful. So we're not talking about it with location and setting close to the beach or good weather for football, but just how far away from home, maybe a drive 2 to 4 hours or so works for that student. So we really want to think about safety as well. For the academics part, we do have students who know exactly what they want to do, and they prove that to us by being involved and having realistic expectations and having already started to really explore those ideas. But somewhere around and in excess of 40% of students will change their major between high school and by the time they get to college. So be careful. And they change their minds more than once. Don't choose a college based on the fleeting curiosity or whimsy of a 17-year-old impulsive teen. Keep things open, have lots of different options available. Extracurricular activities really can be so important. Students who get engaged on campus graduate. The 2 little rules are if they're in an activity or 2, and if there's an adult or 2 that they connect with on campus, really increases their chance of succeeding. So we get them started looking at the clubs and the different things going on campus. We remind them when they transition that we want them joining clubs, because that kind of engagement leads to success and positive outcomes for our students. And then we want to understand the community on campus, and we want you and your students to as well. We ask a lot of questions. We really try to get a measure of that campus culture. We spend a lot of time in the cafeteria. I'll talk to anyone, but we also encourage you and your students to spend time there. If your students, the more outgoing type, they can start asking questions, waiting in line for the pizza or the stir fry. Sometimes they get invited to sit with new friends and, just sort of wave goodbye and let them go off and do that. But we want them to understand, is this a place where I'll feel comfortable? Is this a place where I'll have good friends? And then this is, again, I've already confessed that I love zits. This is sort of what we're facing, and it can take a while to figure out this college puzzle, but we encourage you to just keep the conversations going anyway. Be prepared, help your student be prepared, be flexible. Remember that no one does it all. Perfect is the enemy of good. We just want to make progress. And honestly, as a parent who's already sent her or kids off, don't forget to have fun with your student while they're still living at home. Doesn't last all that long. So here's my contact information, and I'm going to stop sharing and answer any questions.
Joan, we have one question from a parent who has asked about gap years. She and her husband are considering it for their son, who's a late birthday and young, going into college next year with ADHD. But she said, when can they expect conversations to begin at school? They haven't had any yet, with their child's advisor or college counseling to suggest when to begin researching and putting together a plan for potentially gapping next year.
Yeah, so it's never too early to start. I recommend that parents and the student together do some research, sort of get some ideas, and then absolutely make an appointment with the counselor to get the school involved. Again, strongly recommend. It's so much easier to apply to colleges and then defer, then wait, do the gap year, and then try to apply to colleges. Your counselor might have left, your teacher recommenders might have left or may not remember the specific incidents that make great letters of recommendation. So I would say absolutely now, tomorrow, ask for an appointment. Spring of the year is when they start really focusing a lot on the college planning, and get in there early and talk about what the student wants to do. And also to know that there are so many wonderful resources about gap years in our area. I recommend you go back and listen to Janet Price's presentation from last month. She's a gap year expert. There's a gap year fair that will come to our area, to many, many high schools, the Gap Year Association. So good for them. And yeah, lots of resources, and start now.
So this probably goes in line with what you just mentioned, but another question is, can you please tell us again where you can find a good coach to help children start with registering if there are alternatives?
So I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. Where to find a good...
Are there lists? Is there some, I'm assuming this now, are there lists, or is there some way for parents to say, this is a good coach to help us with alternatives to going straight to college?
I see. So I think that this family could start with the guidance counselor and the career and counseling center at school, because they should have resources for that. IECA, which is my organization, has a find a consultant feature that can help find, the type of consultant that you're looking for. I know as a parent, I was very involved in the GTLD network, and also in CHAD and LDA, Montgomery County. And my peers were also who I went to for who's good, who can help me with that. And Kathy, you might have some ideas being very active in Chad.
One place I do know, I mean, Janet's a member of it, the Gap Year Association only lists coaches who are certified to work with transition. And through Chad, I mean, putting things up on the national pages and getting responses from different Chad groups on who knows in particular areas, somebody that may be good if you're looking at something outside of the DC area. There are, you know, we're a national network, so you could ask a question and then we can pass it on to other groups if, you know, your child might be looking at wanting to move to a different area.
Right. And I'll say also, I put my email address there. This is the type of question where I'm willing to go into my files a little bit and listen to what a parent is looking for and try to connect them with the right person. Again, our practice, we're all parents and we are here to help each other. So next question.
Exactly, as are we. So yes, thank you very much, Joan, because we appreciate you have a plethora of knowledge in this area. Does it make a big difference for colleges to know that during a gap year, the student will be working in something relevant?
Yes. I think that when you ask for a deferral, the best deferral letter is dear admissions officer, by name, hopefully. I am so excited about attending such and such college, but before I do, I think that it would be, you know, would really help me develop or grow or to learn more about my major or whatever it is by doing this thing. I plan to work in hospitality because that's my eventual major, and I'm going to get this sense of back of the house, in front of whatever it is, the more specific, the better. Showing ownership is critical. Students should say, I planned this, and they should. They should be part of, I wanted to, in the first semester, improve my academics, and in the second semester, develop my job skills, help other people, travel independently, make sure that I'm ready to step onto campus. They can even, you know, look for a little research that says, I know from going to the Gap Year Fair, from reading an article, that I will do better in college with this extra time in preparation. That is the kind of letter that will get the deferral rather than, you know, I want to defer for a year. That doesn't do it. So yes, and in your applications, same thing. That's the approach. Use explain, make them understand.
We have families that are asking if you could either put your email into the chat or put that slide up again so that they can see your contact information.
Sure can. And it's really easy. Joan@collegeld.com.
Excellent. So one more question is, somebody's asking how you can find a good and comprehensive list of programs and assistance services for ADHD students.
So in college, are we asking?
I
So
think at this point they're looking for a list of schools that would have great services for kids with ADHD.
Yeah, so there are certainly published books like the K&W. There are websites that can help you find them. I think that you can also, there are free services. College Express has schools that are friendly for students with ADHD. I think by Googling around, you can start to find these different colleges. And again, I think crowdsourcing helps. It's not that it's that hard to find the colleges. And again, I'm happy to provide specific websites to look at. But it is, what is the service being offered and how does it fit what my student needs? And then again, being, you know, if it's just coaching and the rest is right, can you bring in, talk to one of the virtual firms, or honestly, we have a lot of students who are working with excellent coaches here in Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC, excellent coaches who can go with them to college. And if the person is trained for this, they can, I talked about continuity of care. This can be continuity of coaching, getting them through, hopefully getting them to that, to more independence, less frequency, what have you. But that's what I would do. So yeah, so books, internet research, there's a website, Judy Bass has a website, Jill Burstein has a website, and I think those are subscription services. So you can pay those, or you can dig around on your own and check with other people too.
And you can directly call learning support offices at any university and ask what
You
their
sure can.
support structure is.
Good point. Thank you. And actually, I always encourage parents to go on the website. And if it's hard to find, then that's sort of an indication. But you just Google, get on the website and search for the word disability or accessibility. Sometimes I'll look up tutoring, because that usually gets me to that first bucket for everyone. And then I'll search accommodations, and that usually gets me to the other service. They all have different names. So you just have to look like that. But then you really can read and be impressed at the services, or you cannot find much and get that clue. But yes, then you certainly can call as well. I try to be respectful of their time. So I like to do my research first rather than say, tell me about what you've got. I usually will do every bit of research I can and say, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is what you're saying, and have that conversation.
I don't have anybody else who has asked anything in the chat. Please, if anybody wants to. Joan, you're getting a lot of people thanking you. This was
Great.
wonderful. I think we're at a place, though, where we've answered everybody's questions. Thank you so much. Joan, will you be sharing your slides? People are asking.
I'm happy to, if there's a way for you to share them. My pleasure.
So we will get this video recording up on our YouTube channel. We will get some or all of Joan's slides. And people are saying, please to the slides. Joan, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a hot topic and people are concerned about how they move forward. Everybody, with getting slides, you will have, and seeing the video, you will have Joan's contact information. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you again in March. The 14th will be our next lecture on abstract goal setting with Emily Griswold. And we appreciate everybody coming tonight. And thank you again.